think when I was coming into it, the primary legacy was about being first.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ayana Young. On the MFCA Communications Committee, and I'm bringing to you another wonderful speaker in our MFCA interviews lineup, a woman who needs little introduction, Dr. Quinetta Roberson. Woo! The crowd goes wild, as I always say, because I think they really are on the other end. She is currently the John A. Hanna Distinguished Professor in Management and Psychology at the Broad College of Business at Michigan State University. And she traveled there during the pandemic, mind you, from Villanova University, where she was at for about 10 years. She was at the first ever PhD Project Conference in 1994 and is a member of the Hall of Fame, where she got inducted in 2019, so very recently. So without further ado, thank you so much for being with us today, Quinetta. We're so excited to hear from you and jump into some questions. So we want to hear a little bit about what your most exciting part of the position as AOM president you had.
See, if we weren't in a pandemic, I probably would have answered this completely differently because I was really looking forward to the conference. But, I think that the opportunity to be connected to 20,000 people across the world was actually the most exciting part. Now, sometimes it became challenging. We had this joke within with me and the headquarters team, because probably twice a week, I would get an email from someone that said, "Hey, Quinetta," and it'd be like, somebody, like, I don't know, I'm like, I don't know you. But they'd be like, "Hey, Quinetta," right? And it was something where they wanted to like ask a question or offer advice or insights on something the Academy should do, which was great, right? And although I got these emails and I was like, who are these people saying, "Hey, Quinetta"? What I realized over time was like the fact that they approached me like that made me think like I felt good about being accessible, and where people thought they could just reach out with like ideas and interests and thoughts, etc. So like there are people who I knew their names, I hadn't met them. Just there are people at like who I probably would have never met, but just having that platform to have a link to that many people with such diversity of like interests and backgrounds, et cetera, throughout the world was just, to me, that was the most exciting. If I had to pick something secondary, it would be being able to see behind the curtain of our profession. And, the Academy, a lot of people just see it as like division and interest groups. But there's so many volunteers working on like the Career Center and the Ethics Committee, and there's the journals and the journal portfolio and all of these moving parts. And even like, I love the headquarters staff at AOM and folks who are like concentrating on technology or like enhancing member services. So I feel like, people nowadays, a lot of people, as they move through their career, they want to be on boards. Mm-hmm. But they think about it as corporate boards, but this is the Academy we're the board of governors. And so just being able to get that like leadership experience and see things like strategically and operationally, it really was developmental for me as well. So I think that was exciting too.
So what legacy did you hope to leave after your tenure as president?
I think when I was coming into it, the primary legacy was about being first, right? That we hadn't had an underrepresented minority as president. And actually from like an age diversity perspective too, I was kind of, I wanted to like, I thought those could be impactful in some way, but I think I was originally thinking about it more in terms of the representation. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, like, when I was elected, I got an email from Stella and Como who was the first person of color on the board of governors. She was a rep at large. And she wrote me an email that really, I have it on my desk in my office, and it has like traveled with me. But she was like, this is what we were working for. Aww. And I was like, and so it was then about me doing Stella and others proud, right? That there were so many that had come before us. So I'm like, I stand on the shoulder of giants. How do I deliver and on all of their hard work and their efforts? And so, like, as I reflect on my presidential year, I think the legacy, what I mentioned, was about representation. I actually think that it became more about shifting the culture of the academy. That, I believe in practicing what I preach, and I study inclusion. And so, thinking about how to make it more inclusive, I'm not talking diversity, because we got diversity, but more so, how do we make people feel connected and have a sense of belonging, and that it is their professional home and those kinds of things. And then, add some flavor to it too, right?
Always.
Yeah. So that became the other thing, right? Like, I just, yesterday's president isn't today's president. So how do we just make it a little bit different?
Curious about how you feel, being AOM president has really impacted both your fellow African-American scholars and even underrepresented minorities at large. You mentioned, this was part of, paving the way, being the first. But in any other ways do you feel has impacted your colleagues?
I think I always want to be a model of what's possible. Me being president could say to somebody, oh, you could be AOM president. But then there's like other stuff, right? Like, how there's a way to build on that. So, like, I want people to know, to keep like pushing forward, and like, let's still create history, and let's, break ceilings and stuff like that. But I think also, I hope to be a model of what's needed. Mm-hmm. It probably is at top of mind for me right now, because as past president, I'm responsible for the Academy's elections. Mm-hmm. And so the nominating committee, comes up with a proposed slate. I've got to call people and invite them. And there's some people who are like, I'm too busy. I've got too many commitments. I've got this, right? And that's, everybody's got their own life. And so I certainly reply and let them know that I understand. But there was, I'm busy. But I thought that, my voice and my efforts were needed. And so let me figure out a way to make time so that if I am elected, I give this my full attention and effort. So it may not be, some people, like, they don't necessarily think of this aspect of service. They'll think about like being on journal editorial boards or being department chair, but it's another way of impacting the field. And it's such broad impact. There's such opportunity for global impact. So being able to kind of show people what's also like what we need in the profession too. I think when everybody's elected to the leadership track, 4 years earlier, you're already thinking, I got to do a presidential address, right? So
start writing each.
Yeah, you're like, what am I going to say? And then, so there's that anxiety, but then you're like, now I'm like, I got to do this virtually. And like, how do you do that in a way, it's different, right? Yeah. But afterwards, so two things. One is some of our fellow MFCAers who are dear friends. Actually, I decided to go home to Philadelphia during the conference, and they actually came to Philly and watched the presidential address with me.
Oh.
And I'm going to shout out like Atira, because, Atira is always like crying or whatever. And she, she was just like, what this means. And that just got me, right? Like it just hit so different for her and like all the people who were the group of people who were around, just to be there and be like, to celebrate this moment. And then there was also on Twitter, this woman who I never met before, and she broke down my presidential address. She was like, if y'all didn't see this masterclass, y'all need to check this out. And she like broke it down. And I was like, oh, but she went from like, this is a flex, this isn't a flex, this is this, like it was an analysis. Wow. And then in the end, she tied it to the Black National Anthem. And I was like,
you're like, yes, I did that.
Right? Oh man, but it was just like, so that's why I'm like, I'm a believer that the world turns out the way it's supposed to and everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
But like having that, like, that's all those kinds of things are what I needed. I didn't need the roots and all of that.
All right. So switching a little bit to just MFCA area. You have been involved in PhD project in the MFCA for a long time. So you may have, lots to say and in response to this question, but some things that maybe come top of mind to you. How has MFCA impacted your career?
It's interesting because, I was at the first PhD project conference. I was one of the signers to develop MDSA in 1997. And then once we, everybody can watch Ian's interview, once we matriculated out of our programs, we're like, what now? And so then there was MFCA. So part of it was this like legacy of family, right? Because our project family is our project family. And so, having the social support, those connections, particularly at a time, you're being junior faculty is tough. And so having people who you can, rely on, commiserate with, go to just vent sometimes, that's invaluable. So in that way, I think my MFCA family has been helpful. But then too, there's the professional support, right? That going to, thinking about the conferences we had and presenting on research and teaching and balancing service commitments or balancing work and life and all of these things, we come from a diverse group of programs and schools and backgrounds. And so just having people where you can be your authentic self, but also vulnerable enough to ask the questions that you want to ask to people who have who probably had similar experiences is important. And it's interesting because now MFCA, you still get that like social and professional support, but even now as people like transition to different career stages or just even different careers, right? Some people decide that what they were doing at a certain time isn't for them. That bond is still there. And so whatever kind of support and sustenance you need, I think that's what it's been for me, right? That and it becomes it's like malleable. Whatever you need, you can get it.
All right. So some of these fun questions we like to ask our interviewees, just because we like to, let our audience members get to know a little bit more about you. So what would you say is your most prized possession?
So I am not a big possession person, like things. I'm an experienced person.
Love that.
So if I had to say prized possession, I would probably say my passport. Because I'm on my third one. I can look at the stamps and just relive and recreate all those experiences. So that it does something versus me just being like, oh, I've been to this country, but I can actually like kind of remember it a bit more.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you've been a ton of places. Do you want to maybe share one of your most favorite places? We can say within the last, I don't know.
Not 2 years.
Yeah, not 2 years, like COVID messed up. Maybe in the last 5 years? Unless you have a favorite of all time, of course.
Let me say this. There are a handful of top places, but for different reasons.
Okay.
So for example, I'll give you a couple examples. Okay. One is Machu Picchu. I hiked Machu Picchu.
Wow.
And that was like, I did it by myself. I did the 3-day hike. And while it was like, it took some effort, there was some physicality to it, etc. But then they time it so the last day you're coming across the sun gate at sunrise. And it's just like, it literally brought me to tears. It's like so beautiful and so majestic. And you're at that height and you're just like looking at the world. It's no, right? I don't know what to say, right? Like it just renders me speechless.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, another example is the beauty that I experienced when I went to South Africa for the first time, which was like in 2005. And it was interesting because I was getting off the plane and one of the flight attendants said, "Welcome home." And I'm like, well, I gotta be home, right? Like all these other people, why am I home? Whatever.
Yeah. All right.
And then I was in the airport and people were walking up to me speaking Afrikaans. And I was like, I don't know what you're saying. And then they would get mad at me and start like yelling at me.
Oh, you're like,
Again, I don't know what's going on here. So then I went to a coffee shop with a colleague, and the woman who was the server just kept staring at me. And he asked me, he said, "Why is she staring at you?" I went, "I don't know." And when she came back, she's still staring at me. She just kept staring at me. And he said to her, "Do you know her?" She said, "Yes." And he said, "Where's she from?" She said, "The Eastern Cape." He said, "What does she do there?" She said, "She's a teacher." And he said, "Are you related to her?" She said, "I think so." And what I found out during that trip is from like the top of my face, I'm Xhosa, so Xhosa, which is the tribe from the Eastern Cape. So that's why people said, "Welcome home." That's why the people in the airport were speaking Afrikaans because they thought I could understand it, but thought that I had come to the US and got too big for my britches and was like denying my background.
Wow.
But once I realized that, then I like started to lean. I was like, oh, right. Like it kind of got me to my core because I'm like, am I from here? Right? Like, am I home?
I am home.
I'm home. And so just like having that experience, and I was part of a program that Cornell sponsored, and I would go over there then every year and do a business program for African small business owners. That was just some of the most like personally rewarding work I've ever done. Wow. So just the culture and the beauty of the people and everything, that just really got me. Yeah. And then finally, my third example, I went to India in 2019. And I had never wanted to go to India. Again, practice what I preach. I was like, I need to push through and like take on this challenge. And I took a group of students, 10 MBA students with me. I loved India so much. Wow. I loved the people, the food, the culture, everything. It affected me so much that I was like, why didn't I, the fact that I was so apprehensive, and then I was just like, I don't want to leave. I want to stay. Yeah. So, yeah. So I think in general, like I can find the beauty in most places.
Yeah.
There's only like one or two places where I'm like, I'm never going back.
Yeah. Okay, so you're a traveler, world traveler. Is that something you do to relax, or are there other things you might do to relax in your spare time? Do you have other hobbies?
Yeah, I'm an avid reader. I read a lot. I usually have 2 to 3 books going on at one time. I usually have a fiction book that I'm reading and a nonfiction I'm listening to, and then some other like big book that's going to take a while. So like if anybody's on Goodreads. Also, I cook. I love to cook. That's actually relaxing for me. So to spend a day cooking and kind of like, I feel like it's science. Yeah. So I like that. I run. I'm a runner. So that's pretty relaxing. And drink wine.
Love it. Love it. I think you just hit pretty much on my face.
All the things.
It's the beginning of 2022. Any big plans, New Year resolutions, maybe year mantras you're trying to stick to? Anything come to mind?
So I've never been like a resolution person, or at least what I'll do is I'll have a set of developmental goals, I'll say, because I think one, if I just set one thing, it becomes dichotomous, right? You either do it or you don't. And it can be demoralizing. So like I try to do a number of things because then I'm like, oh, I did these, but I didn't do them. And then I try to set goals that are like I said, developmental. So for example, I just don't understand gardening, but I feel like I want to garden. Like I feel like that's what I should do. So I want to learn, I want to like start gardening this year. But I will say a very like achievable thing. And I've got like professional stuff too. And there's this NSF proposal I want to submit for grant funding. And like, I got those kinds of things. Those kind of stay on the radar. But I had a milestone birthday last year. And one of the things that I found out is that I could participate in the Senior Olympics. Oh. This is random. Okay. So
I'm here for it.
And they have track and field. Oh. So I was like, ooh, I can sprint, right? And you sprint in your age group. Like it's like increments of 5.
Yeah.
If you get first in your age group, in your event, you go to the national Senior Olympics. Mm-hmm. So that's what I want to do. So I want to qualify this year. So I ran a week after my birthday and I got first in the 100 and 200. But it was the Winter Olympics. So I didn't qualify. You have to run in the Summer Olympics to qualify. Oh. So okay. I've got to run in August. So actually, I think it's the week after Academy, 2 weeks after Academy. Oh. But I've got to come back to Michigan, run. If I get first in my event, then I get to go to nationals in 23.
Wow. Okay.
Which that will then be my goal for 23 is if I get in, I'm going to try to win that joint.
Yeah.
When you see me like in the morning, if you go to the Academy in Seattle and you see me like up in the mornings, like doing a sprint workout or something, see me dressed, you'll be like, oh, I know what she's doing.
Training for nationals.
Training for nationals.
All right, well, Quinetta, thank you so much for your time today. As we wrap up all of our questions here, I just want to, leave some space for you to chime in if you have any parting words for our fellow MFCA colleagues.
I'm challenged to do so because there's such diversity in who we are as MFCA, right? I think that sometimes in the profession, people see us as a monolith, but we are all unique people with, unique capabilities and skills and competencies and backgrounds and experiences and ways of thinking, blah, 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 blah. So for that reason, I think because people often see us that way and just the way the profession is, we often think that there's a particular model in order to succeed at this, but I want to encourage people to kind of like write their own story. That if I let others write my story, I probably wouldn't have been AOM president. I probably wouldn't have had a lot of the experiences that I've had to this point. So, don't let other people kind of dictate or tell you what's for you. You know what's for you, and do that. Like that's the simplest thing, because I think that's the beauty of us in all of our kind of the multiness of us. So, seize that, leverage that, be that, and I think you can't help but be successful.
We'll be successful. We'll be great. 2022 beyond, everybody. Write your story.
Write your story.
Thank you so much, Quinetta.
My pleasure. Thank you. This is fun. But you know what? I feel like it was the Lord's way of being like, relax, right?
Calm down.
Yeah.
You were about to do the most.
I was asking the Academy folks, I'm like, can you call the Roots and see what they're doing? Let me contact my people. I'm from Philly. I'm like, let me see what Will Smith is doing. Hall and Oates, right? So I was like, you know what? It's probably for the best. I probably just needed to sit down somewhere. I was a sprinter in high school and college.
Awesome. What did you do? What did you do? The 100? I ran
5,500 and 200.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And then the relays.
Nice.
So that's my preferred workout, is like sprints. Mm-hmm. But then I was like, how old am I going to be running sprints? So like 5 to 7 years ago, I was like, I'm going to turn myself into a distance runner. And I'm going to do half marathons. And so, but I was like, the first half that I do is going to have wine involved. And everybody was like, that doesn't even make sense. But I found there's a series of wine runs where you like run through wine countries and run through vineyards. And then at the end, you run into a wine festival.
Wait a second. Why have I never heard of this? Hey, Quinetta, how many emails are you still getting? Hey, Quinetta.
Yeah.
Come on. You're like, come on.
Well, now I can send them to Herman. Hey, Herman.
Oh, forward. Hey, Herman.
Yeah.